All right. We are here with Dominic Bergani, who works for a fire department in Southwest Florida. He is the Special Operations Training Coordinator for his county and has been in the fire service for 25 years and was originally from Connecticut. So Dominic Bergani, that's a good Irish name.
Yeah.
Yeah, or not. Not actually ever, if I'm right, never a member of MTV's Jersey Shore,
No.
but
No.
can
Although,
nonetheless.
although I can throw down the meatballs and spaghetti.
I know. I've seen you, man. I've seen you, and that's good. You can also, if I'm not mistaken, I don't know if this is even appropriate or confidential, but if at the right time, you can actually squeeze your nipples and suntan lotion comes out. Is that correct, or still
Yeah, and the coconut flavor is gone, but
like an SPF, like at
yeah,
least 20? Okay,
yeah,
that's
at
cool.
least. At
So
least.
you have been in the fire service 25 years. You're now in Florida. You started off in Connecticut, and I
I mean,
think I'm going to have you kind of talk about this, but started your state's task force. Why don't you hit us a little bit on your background, Dom?
yeah. Well, the fire departments that I worked for up north was primarily a special operations station that I put most of my time in. So we really, that started in the late '80s, early '90s when technical rescue was just starting. Local teams were starting. There was no state task force, but it was really one honed in little group in one station that I worked at for a while. That kind of brought it to fruition. From there, just prior to 9/11, with all the terrorist act stuff coming down, the state decided to put together a state task force. There was a handful of people from all over the state that came together up in Hartford. We got the first state task force for the state of Connecticut up and running. Pretty much just right after 9/11 was when we were functional. So we weren't there as a quote unquote team, although some regional teams did respond down there, myself included. But that was kind of the history of where I came from. From there, it went on to teaching nationally based on the things I saw, what I did, what we did, what worked, what didn't work. Believe it or not, the best thing that came out of 9/11 for most of the guys that taught nationally was we all came together and we got to see each other and we got to work together and we figured out all the problems. Not all of the problems, but a lot of the problems that happens when you actually go to a response.
So with that, when you went to 9/11, when you responded to New York, what did you do as far as tasks go, and what was kind of the evolution after that as far as the gaps that you guys found?
It really varied daily. It could be anything from bucket brigade to we always say hurry up and wait and stand by and wait for the next crew to come off the pile. But searching holes, subways. Interesting enough is one of the things before most of the national teams came in, it was all local assets that were there doing their thing, and without the amount of tons of equipment that came in, any truck that get parked on the side of the road on Canal Street basically just got completely emptied out within the first 10 minutes and all the gear gone. But there was points where, hey, we need a high line to go across this pit. And I was with the late Billy Quick from Rescue 4, and he turned to me, and here's a very seasoned guy, been in technical rescue his 25, 28 years. And he turns to me, hey, kid, you know how to put up one of these things? So and based on what we had. And that's where it kind of first rang a bell to me that it's great to have the great, big, huge equipment cache and have all this equipment. But when defecation hits the cooling apparatus, we kind of have to make it happen, So, here we were with two ropes and an 8 plate and a bunch of carabiners and, made a high line.
Now, you lost a buddy of yours as kind of a result a few years after 9/11
Yeah.
from respiratory issues and things like that also.
Yeah, that's Billy. That's the guy I was just talking about. He, came up with multiple types of cancer and pretty much was retired shortly, I don't know, probably 9 months to a year later after 9/11. And then from there, it just kind of spiraled downhill over the course of the next couple of years. I think he's about 4 years now. I think he's gone.
Yeah, I think you and some of your buddies from there were there when he passed away too, right?
Yeah, it was kind of crazy. We, I he's one of my best friends, so I stayed in touch with him even though it wasn't up there anymore. And we basically talked 2, 3, 4 times a day. He'd always call and try to figure out like what I was doing on the job. Did I check my air pack, and was the Hearst tool ready to go? And so we talked a bunch, and I just kind of got this funny feeling that things weren't going too well. He was going into kidney failure, doing dialysis a couple times a week. We decided. I called all the instructors that we all worked with together, and a couple of his buddies from across the United States, and decided to show up and say, hey, And we showed up, and that night he died. So we were there to put him to rest and kind of help out his family through kind of a tragic thing, since that he wasn't really per se scheduled to die by the doctors.
Yeah, that's tough. So after 9/11, there's obviously a lot of people that are involved in that. Basically, a lot more funding, a little bit more organization came about, and a lot of things related to task force and tech rescue after that. Then,
yeah, totally. Training budgets started opening up. All the grant money started coming down the pipe, and that lasted for probably a good 5 to 8 years. But in that time, everybody wanted technical rescue training. I actually left Connecticut. That's how I got to Florida. Is I left Connecticut to work with a company that taught pretty much internationally. At the time was one of the largest companies that did technical rescue in the States. And that's kind of where I made my network of friends, learned the craft, really learned the craft, because I was a very traditional, by the book instructor. We were taught certain things. We're in a curriculum, never to deviate from this. But it's not until you start teaching nationally and you start seeing what other jurisdictions are doing and what other instructors are teaching that you realize there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Right. Yeah, and I think that kind of builds into what we're kind of really wanting to talk about for the most part, is some of your philosophy as far as is there is not just one way to do it. And a lot of times, we learn these things in whatever class we take, a rope 1, rope 2, collapse, confined space, whatever. And that's pretty much the standard. So here's the deal. These are the knots you're going to know. These are the knots you're going to utilize. This is the hardware you're going to use. This is NFPA 1883. We are not going to deviate from this.
Right.
When in reality, there's a gap, and we'll probably talk about that more later, but there's a gap between reality and training that there are no real rules for. That's a huge fold. And a lot of people aren't prepared for that because they're taught the one way to do it. This is the right way to do it, and this is how it's gonna roll. We're gonna have mirrored systems on belay. We're gonna do this. We're using 12.5 millimeter nylon rope, and this is how it's gonna roll. Once you go outside of that bell curve, people get uneasy, and so a little bit with your philosophy. I know that the first time we met quite a few years ago, we were introduced through a mutual friend, although you actually work at the department I used to work at. We just weren't there at the same time. We busted out the rope bags, busted out the coffee, and it was pretty much game on of show and tell of freaking rope skills and crap like that. And I looked down and I remember knowing your background, you opened up your bag of goodness there, and I looked down and saw a climbing, I think it was a black diamond, Camelot, right? A spring-loaded camming device, and I'm like, what the shit, man?
What's he doing?
And it was, you didn't have it for climbing, and so in the end, I realized you had a little bit different approach where it was probably more disciplinary, multidisciplinary approach, looking at other things. Can you talk a little bit about what your philosophy was and how it's changed, looking at other avenues, other disciplines of rescue?
Well, yeah, it definitely, not getting pigeonholed into what you were taught by the book is a big thing. That whole thing where I was talking about before, teaching nationally, and we go on a trip to go teach somewhere, and you're in a hotel room with another instructor, and you're busting out all this, PowerPoints and whatnot, and here we do this, we do that, and you're like, wow, that sharing in information is incredible, and incredibly blessed to have that opportunity to be able to share where the guys that are on the task force that don't do that don't get that experience. Just looking for other resources and sources on how others do things, and then a lot of it in my mind has to do with on a personal level, right? Like the self-reflection of your skill sets and your training methodologies, and how does that apply to the incident? Because you know as well as I do, we could train all day long, even do scenario training once you know the basics, but then you get to the call and it's nothing like you've ever trained on.
Right.
So at that point is you have to set the urgency level. You know, can we take our time with this, or does it happen now? You know, that's the analogy of, you know, training to be a fighter. If you're a kung fu guy, you know, trained on all this kata and form for 10 years, and you're a black belt, but you've never been punched in the nose, you don't know what's going to happen when you feel that sting. You know.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's it, man. I think a lot of people probably have grown into how you think about things as far as a multidisciplinary approach, looking for other ways to do it, better ways to do it, different ways of doing it. When you don't have all the equipment, that's what we do a whole bunch. And I think that usually grows out of getting burned, you know, running into a thing where you were that textbook guy at one point and then realize, man, I should probably look at other avenues, man. You know,
there's a whole world out there.
Right. I think, you know, after failures, when we learn that maybe that textbook isn't all it's cracked up to be a lot of times. So with that, you know, I think part of it that I'm interested in talking to you about too is being able to look at your cache of equipment, or what's on that truck, or what's in that bag that you're doing mountain rescue, or you're doing, you know, something in special operations as a federal team, or you're on a task force, and looking at the equipment that you have and figuring out all the different uses for it, or different ways you can employ that. And I remember a story you told me years ago on an incident. I can't remember what it was, but I think it was involving one of those large cement underground pipes that they were putting down in one of these big kind of holes or crevasse type deals, and it rolled onto a guy's leg. Ended up where most people would take those airbags or those cushions or anything down to where he was and start kind of stabilizing that and then trying to lift that off, which probably wouldn't be the best incident, where you actually laid a high anchor across that ditch area that pipe was laid into and put webbing underneath that, and then used the airbags on the high anchor and just lifted the bags, which the webbing was on top of, which consequently lifted the pipe up.
Right. Yeah, you gotta really think outside the box, and that's the whole point of knowing your craft and using the basic skills as tools in the toolbox, and then putting those tools to use. In that particular incident that you were talking about was a trench rescue where a 24-inch culvert pipe fell on top of a guy that was in the hole, and the hole was really soft mud, so you really couldn't get anything underneath the pipe that could lift it. And so this guy's legs are trapped underneath it. What we ended up doing was putting some 2-inch webbing around the bottom of the pipe, and then coming up a couple double wrapped enough where it would go up to an airbag that was sitting on 6x6s that was held 5 feet in the air with a crib stack. So as you lifted the airbag, it pulled the strap upwards, and it was just enough to get the guy's leg out. So, you know, that was a neat way of doing it. We had another one probably about 2 weeks ago, almost the same scenario. Guy was using one of those contraptions that packs the soil around the edge of edge of the trench. There was a trench box in the trench, which is remarkable because I didn't think anybody actually used them. But this guy, the ground compactor slipped, and he went down underneath it, landed in the bottom of the trench. The pipe moved, and he got stuck in between the pipe and the ground compactor. And it was one of those things where, do we need to go full out on this scenario, right? We got a trench box. The air's been monitored already. Everything's great. So let's just get in the trench and use the spreaders, a little cribbing and a hydraulic spreader, just to move the pipe 3 inches to get his leg out. So boom, there's another way of doing it based on the scenario.
That's cool. If you could talk a little bit about the evolution of the changes that you've seen in tech rescue over the years, shifting from different diameters to mirrored belay systems to potentially doing single rope techniques and things like that.
Yeah, it's evolved greatly. I remember when I first got into it, we were using 5/8 rope, mirrored systems. Everything was huge, extra large D carabiners. It required a truck to carry everything everywhere. to, then moving into the world of half-inch rope. Now potentially you're seeing some systems built with just a single line rope, SRT, half-inch rope. Technology is building better ropes. They're building more advanced equipment, simplifying things. I love the CMC MPD because it takes, I don't know, 7 or 8 pieces of equipment out of the equation. You can turn that from a belay into a haul system back to a belay system without doing any hokey hitches or using a little mini 4-to-1 like the Aztec to do a load release. All this equipment that's coming out today, you got to look at it and don't just buy it because the rep says it's really cool. Put it through its courses and see if it really pertains to you, and if you guys can use it. I think that's the key to the whole evolution process too, is seeing what's out there and then discerning what is cool and what really works.
Right. One of the other things I wanted to hit on, some of the obstacles that you run into, being the training coordinator for a county special operations group for Tech Rescue, is when you're bringing things up that are outside the normal textbook or the normal curriculum on ways of doing things. What do you find is your biggest friction point, your biggest obstacles? Is it admin that doesn't understand what an authority having jurisdiction is, or is it the mindset of these guys through that've been doing this for 12 years that see it as we are always going to do a figure 8, man. We are always going to do this. There needs to be a safety to this, or what is the biggest friction points that you come across for people wanting to potentially evolve or think potentially outside the normal bell curve?
Well, I think a lot of it has to do with misinformation. You got a lot of people in the fire service that have been there for 20 years. And if you look at when the standard 1983 came out, a lot of those people are still in the fire service. And, like me, sometimes I don't keep up on everything. And, a lot of things have changed since 1983 as far as there's still people out there that think that if you use a rope in an actual call on an incident that you have to throw it out. That was an original 1983 standard that you couldn't use a rope unless if it was put in service. It had to be brand new rope. So people still think that. People still think that there's 15-to-1 safety factors for systems when in reality it is that's something that it's a manufacturer standard, not for actually building the systems. But the obstacles from that turn into simple things like, okay, a team's been using a dropper 8 on a line for making a pigtail for confined space, and that's great. We know the stats on a dropper 8. It's good. It's good in one direction. It's not good in another direction if it needs to be hauled. So it'll actually roll the knot. So telling them that they got to do a butterfly instead of a dropper 8 was like upsetting the whole world. Their whole world shattered. This is what we've been doing for the last 30 years, the way it was taught in our little stick figure book that was written.
Right.
Converting. Here's another one. Like you got a double Prusik belay and a bar rack. Well, if you try to convert your bar rack into a haul, there's a whole lot of things that you have to go ahead and do. But why not just convert the double Prusik belay, take a bite, a Gibbs, and a carabiner, and turn it into the haul, and you get it done.
Right.
So save a lot of time. And really, is the functionality of that haul the same? Yes. Is it pulling the rescuer possibly from a different point, or the victim from a different point? Yes, but that's why all these systems are built the way they are. It's why the manufacturers have standards. So those connections are going to be valid connections, and there's no reason why you can't convert a belay into a haul line.
Right. And I think you and I talked about like just the safety that surrounds what we do now, and people that are coming into Tech Rescue now, where we can look back at some of the the classic, like on old Rescue 911 with William Shatner, man, one of the balls out baddest ass freaking roof rescues from FDNY done I think it was in Manhattan, where there was no anchor. Right, yeah, it was yeah, exactly, man. And I think 2 of those guys lost their lives in 9/11, man, that were involved in that rescue. But dude, there was no anchor. Dude laid on his back, did I think what was like a double or triple wrap, spine wrap on his carabiner, was the meat anchor. 2 dudes laid on top of him and lowered a fireman down. The guy he was rescuing jumped onto him, like kind of shock loaded that entire system. I think they took him down one more floor, and some guys pulled him in with some pike poles. But and then as soon as they finished that one, they had to get up and go do the same rescue on the other side of the building. That wasn't even Kern Mantle rope, man. That was the old like, Manila laid, 3 wrap deal. But they made it happen, and now we look at it and we're like, hey, we're not even sending somebody over the edge unless we've got a mirrored system, 12.5 millimeter Kern Mantle rope with, break strength of 9,000 pounds, and we're using NFPAG rated everything. And I'm not saying, we don't need to be concerned, but you've got people that like do not want to go over that edge unless they've got a mirrored system or a belay line on them. And obviously, you've done a lot of work with us, and a lot of people we are training, and we're doing that with a 7.5 single rope and just understanding the system. But we talked about where did this come from to where you can almost become too safety oriented that it's almost becomes more dangerous, if you will, because you don't understand a reliance on your equipment or what that strength is or how it actually works. You just build in all the safety, which takes time, which takes a while to set up, which takes more manpower, more equipment. And meanwhile, your casualty's still there, not getting rescued. So, I think you and I talked about this for a while, and I think a lot of it may come from it's not a performance error of the equipment. Very few times have we ever heard of that rope snapped, that carabiner broke, or this occurred or that occurred, or the prusik failed. It's normally always a human error.
Yeah. I mean, that's one of the biggest questions I've always had. Was I see a department, numerous departments have truck companies, and truck companies have roof rope rescue bags. Right, it's a single line 1/2-inch rope in a bag. Why is it okay for a truck company to have a roof bag to make a rescue, but then a tech team to go make a rescue has to have, multiple anchor points, multiple ropes, piggyback Z-hauls, bar racks, prusik belays, all this craziness to do almost the exact same rescue? Why is it okay for one and not the other? And it's really based on urgency and who's there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting when you look at it, from Jeff and I hit on this before too. When you look at a system safety factor, and the misguidedness of there's a 15-to-1 and all this other crap that went on a while ago that people were believing to be real. When you look at that entire system, you may have your 40 kilonewton carabiners and your 12.5 NFPA 1983 rope that's at almost at 9K. But then you look down throughout your whole system, and a lot of people have 8 millimeter nylon prusiks. That's at most usually around 11 kilonewtons, and you go through there, and things just don't add up. What are you using for your anchors? Is it flat webbing? Is it tubular webbing? Is it all those things make a difference. And when you look at it as a system, you see a lot of inconsistencies. Man, you'll have like a super strong this and really not a real strong this, yet this is holding your weight. And I think a lot of it fundamentally comes down to what you talked about before is this is a craft, and a lot of people I don't think of it as a craft. Everybody hates it if somebody calls you an SME or anything like that, because I think you, just the same as us, are like never call me a subject matter expert, never call me that at all. I think we're students of the game, and to be students of the game, you're always evolving. You're always looking into different ways of doing it and what your performance is for this material. What's nylon 6.6 compared to your aramid fibers, compared to your polyester, and what's the static load of this as far as a drop and things like that. And I think that's where things lack, is people just don't understand necessarily the equipment or how things work with the IDs camming versus how a Gree 2 works or things like that.
Yeah, I totally agree. The know your craft it's paramount on being a rope technician, whatever discipline you're in. You need to know your craft, constantly honing those skill sets, and don't get complacent. I remember that one of the first classes I took, the instructor was up there and reciting tubular nylon webbing, 4,500 pounds, blah, 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 6,000 pounds for flat webbing. But you don't need to know that, was what was told back then. Well, yeah, you do. And it's not just for the instructor to rattle off information on how much he knows, but everyone really should know their craft, know what their equipment is capable of, and how can you stretch it. Can you lift that car with that airbag? I don't know. It says we can, but can we add more weight to it? What'll happen? Let's try it. That's the only way you're going to find out, is honing those original skill sets and then finding out a million other ways to do it. And the late Billy Quick, I'm going to quote him a lot here because he was definitely a mentor in my career. It was, being a fireman is like being a magician. It's knowing a million little tricks.
And I think that's a good segue into what we were talking about before, is when we talk about reality versus training. And I think too often, I think it's extremely important, no matter what your discipline is, whether you're a high-end specialized medic or you're a specialized rescue guy or whatever you are, is what makes you really good is you're a master of the basics, but can up your game with the tools in your toolbox to pull out some voodoo stuff, to pull out those tricks. But the only way you're going to really learn to push those things is to change the way we do training. And in training, I think so much we just, training becomes the bell curve, man. So, all right, we're going to change on, we're going to train on these JPRs today. And I'm a huge fan of job performance requirements. The problem is when you look at a job performance requirement, is it doesn't tell you the technique and it doesn't tell you the equipment. So I don't think people push the extremes of what a JPR is really, So yeah, I can still accomplish that, but what if we didn't have this? What if we didn't have that? What if we were waiting on the 15th floor and the bag is down in the truck and we've got to do this now because of a variable that's out of our control, from weather to the environment to the patient crashing on us or something like that. So what is that PACE type of methodology? What is our primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency? And I don't see a lot of people pushing the limits in training, which is where you're really going to up your game and realize other ways you can use your equipment, other ways that potentially things are going to fail, right? It's just as important to see what your equipment can do as it is to how you can create a failure point for your equipment. So you're like, all right, that's the point of no return at that point with this piece.
Yeah, the PACE methodology of training is definitely a great way of getting a team and all the different levels of knowledge on one page. Like you said before, though, the important part is knowing those original skills, knowing them inside out and backwards. Because if you don't know that, you really can't go to the alternate and the contingency. You have to know the original plan. But with the PACE methodology, is great because in training, if you utilize it, you have the new guys, say, do a pickoff, and then you have the more experienced guys, you change the scenario up a little bit when they're on rope, and you take away a few things, and you have them make it happen with what they have now. So you're challenging them. And in training, that's the toughest part. You put together a training where you get a mixed bunch of people, some with experience, some have absolutely none. If you go too much with it, you lose the new ones. They just kind of, I call it airport man. They just kind of fly around, do touchdowns, and don't really pay attention. And then if you make it too simple, then all the senior members, they're getting disinterested and they don't want to come to training anymore because they're bored out of their mind. So with varying the training and how you can do it through PACE is pretty cool. It works really well.
Yeah, and I think even adding that in as being in your position or the one running the training is even putting perturbations or obstacles in the way of your guys that do know the basics, that are in control of that, have been on that team for a while, is even being able to run a scenario for them that may be on a rooftop where they've got to do a pick or they've got to do whatever, and being able to take things out of their bag before they go. So when they get there, they're expecting something, and what they have is what they have. And just seeing how that goes on, creating puzzles for these people to force them outside that bell curve, force them outside their comfort zone, if you will, and be able to come up with solutions that will work, and when you have a mannequin and a basket or something like that, you can afford yourself to try new things and to fail at that point to see what you can do, what will work and what doesn't work.
Yeah, incorporating different disciplines. We're not just rock breakers, we're also medics. So then you have to incorporate your medic techniques based on the scenario that you're working on.
Yeah, and I think that's where a lot of times the rubber meets the road, is a lot of people separate the medical side, whatever your level is, from a first responder to an EMT to a paramedic to a PA or physician that's involved in these rescues. and rescue, and they're two different things, right? We got the medical and we got the rescue. When in reality, you're doing a casualty management, and so depending on those injuries that you find on that casualty is going to really dictate how you even package them to do your haul or to do your lower. And am I going to do something vertical in a Skedco if I've got a guy that's got an unstable pelvis? No, man, that dude's going to have to go horizontal at that point. And being able to blend the two, I think, is where the magic happens.
Yeah, man. It's that's the difference between stay and play and yank and shank.
Yeah. No, exactly. And the other side too, man, is I think, saying that with mannequins is we see this all the time too, is you almost begin to get a little bit of a complacency when we're always using mannequins in there, to where that edge transition really isn't really that good.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying is like we'll bend the back of a mannequin in a way that is probably going to cause some sort of crazy ass paralysis if it was a human in there. We just get complacent with that, which is that other thing. On the last topic is something we talked about is a little bit of, comparing, and we do it with a bunch of different groups out there that have different specialties, but to even think of if we would compare the technical rescuer to like the MMA fighter, preparing for a fight, is, the MMA guy isn't just learning ground game, right? Jiu-jitsu or something like that. He's not just learning, boxing or striking, standing up. It's a combination of a lot of things, right? They have their boxing coach in there. They got a jiu-jitsu coach in there. They have a nutritionalist. They have a cardio guy. They've got all these members that actually create this kind of holistic person, which would be technically like a craft, a fighting craft at that point. So when we look at it from a tech rescue standpoint, what are some of those things? Just offhand, I'm thinking you need to have a good understanding of physics, man. You need to understand that friction's your friend when you're lowering, friction's your enemy when you're hauling. And then taking that even further, the byproduct of friction is heat. So, how does my material that I'm even using adapt to the heat? We had these conversations with some of the ropes that you see coming out by, folks that aren't really knowledgeable in anything doing with rescue, and, the Anegra ropes that are out there that are polypropylene, and they're selling them as rescue ropes that have a melting point that's like, you can literally hold your finger on a flame at the level that stuff melts and just disintegrates to, and you're holding your finger there like, are you serious? Where in reality, everything we do in rescue does heat. But going off point a little bit there, what are some of those other things besides, materials and physics that really create a holistic technical rescuer, do you think?
Well, technical rescue, there's pretty much, there's 5 disciplines that you, 5, a 6th if you count the whole medical portion of it, that you have to be a master of craft. And it's not exactly, like Susie Homemaker guy that can do his own electrician work and do his own plumbing. So he's a master, he's a jack of all trades and a master of none. We're talking lives. So yeah, you do have to know and master as much as you possibly can. The, rope, confined space, trench, structural collapse. Within structural collapse, there's 5 disciplines in that, swift water, and then of course we get into medicine. So there's a lot of work that needs to go into learning the craft.
Yeah.
And just continually staying on it is the point of it. And I think it all brings it back to just self-reflection. You can be a part of the most badass team in the world, and you could be on that team being a mediocre rescuer. Right. So if you don't self-reflect and look at yourself and say, how can I be better at this? It's pretty much written everywhere. Socrates wrote about it. Einstein wrote about it. All the greats, and about how, the highest form of human excellence is to question oneself or others and other techniques. It's in the Bible. How many times in the Bible does it say, a man should examine himself? So, the only way to get better at something and to be in a better version of yourself is to take a look at what you got, what you're doing, your techniques, how you operate, and make it better.
Right. Yeah, I agree, man. And I think that may be a problem with a lot of groups, especially on teams that aren't that active, is what you just discussed was really, is epistemology. How do you know something, right? And it's a question of all the ages. And there's a lot of different disciplines, and some are, by the book. I've studied it in the book, but does that really equate to you knowing it if you read it but never actually performed it? There's experience, which is, hey, you know how to do it, but you don't know all the things behind it. So I think it is a holistic type of environment to try and better yourself. Lenison, man, ending up, last question. You ever meet Snooki, man?
Never met Snooki.
All right.
Although I've met Paulie D though.
Did you really?
Yeah, we talked with him one time.
Really?
Yeah.
Is he D-bag or is he cool?
He was cool.
All right, that's cool.
He was cool. He could throw down the meatballs and spaghetti.
I bet he can, man. All right, we'll get a video of you doing that one of these days, and we'll post it on here, man. It's pretty
awesome.
badass. It'll change people's lives. Hey, man, listen, take it easy, brother, and I appreciate your time.
You too. Stay low and go.
All right, man. See you, bro.
Bye.